Hello, everybody. You are tuned in to the Sexy Asian Dragon, and this is me, Pacific. Wow, what a week. So let me tell you what happened yesterday. I made a stop that I make Monday through Friday on one of my junior high/high school routes. And it's in a neighborhood that would be what I consider yuppie-ish. Made a right turn, turned the corner in front of an elementary school. Cars parked on both sides of the street. Kind of a quiet little neighborhood, but, traffic for the time of the morning I come down through there. There would be a stop sign 100 feet behind me from the street I just turned off. The speed limit is 20 miles an hour. Kids get on at the right of my bus, and students cross from my left. I had pulled up, red lights, going, stop sign out. Highly visible, you can't miss me. The road isn't curvy, there's no blind spots. Kids are loading from the right, and here comes an SUV. And this kid's about to cross. This woman's not stopping. I honk. She pulls through my stop sign down in the middle of my bus. Woman probably in her late 30s. Maybe early 40s, younger than me. Short, ugly haircut style, that plain Jane look. Silver Lexus, dealer plates. And thinking, her husband must either own or be a general manager of a car dealership. And, she's waving the hands around and all this. And all I did was honk. I had my driver's window open, and she rolls her window down and starts to yell. And I said, ma'am, you're supposed to stop for the stop sign. I said, if you look in your mirror, do you see the kid crossing behind you? I said, you almost hit him. I kid you not, the story I'm about to tell you, truth is stranger than fiction. She starts saying, you're harassing me. I'm thinking I'm harassing her. Remember what I told my viewers about how American women use the word harassment and they just apply it for every situation? Remember how I told you, and more, we're all waking up to the fact that with women's studies in college, that I have seen now that women have been and are being conditioned today to not accept any criticism, any exhortation, any correction by a male. This plays out on the roads on a daily basis. I went to my supervisor after my morning routes. She is from Germany. She's been there for years. She came back from a funeral, and I was so glad to see her back. And I didn't even deal with the harassment. I'm just laughing inside going, women and their clinical you ran the stop sign, and I'm telling you, you need to stop. And I told her that because she's waving the arms and, acting out. And I said, ma'am, if you read the Colorado driver's manual, it says you're supposed to stop 10 feet in front of the bus. I stopped. I said, you're at the middle of my bus, ma'am, and you're yelling at me. And she then threatened to, I said, you know what? Here's my bus number. Here's my supervisor's name. I'm on camera inside the bus. I said, please call my supervisor. She can check the video, hear what I said. And I said, and turn around and look out your window at the group of parents standing there watching you. I said, they're watching this every day, and they're tired of people running my stop sign. I said, why don't you go talk to them? And then she says, quit yelling at me. I had to lean my head out the window. I've got a diesel engine going, got the heaters going on in the bus, and I don't know if she can hear me, so I'm raising my voice. I'm not shouting, but I'm... And I said, well, I'm going to write your license plate down, and I'm going to turn this in, and the police will be sending you a notice. So then I pulled the stop sign in after the kid got on, and I wait because she doesn't have a front plate. So I just wait for her to move forward just a little bit so I can see the back license plate. And then she yells, am I allowed to go? I said, stop sign's in. Yes, you're allowed to go now. She goes, and I will be turning you in. I said, please do. I said, next time you see the school bus, you need to stop. Then she goes, well, I'm unfamiliar with the neighborhood, and I stopped. And I said, ma'am, if you can't see a big yellow bus with the stop sign on the red lights, I don't know what to tell you. She pulls over to the curb, gets out of her car, and walks back to the group of parents. Fortunately, the parents have told their daughters, they've gotten on the bus and said, my mom just wanted me to tell you, my dad, several of them said, hey, we're glad you deal with these people running the stop sign. We're really tired of that. I said, yeah, I don't know why people do this. Here's a plain Jane, dowdy-looking woman who thinks she's all that in a bag of chips. She's in her Lexus, justifying why she ran the stop sign, then telling me she stopped. I'm like, I don't have the time to explain to her, if you had hit the student, if he didn't stop when I honked that horn, because I've told my students, if I honk that horn, stop. Don't cross. Just stop. You hit that kid, you're going to have a hard time in a court of law getting yourself out of this one. Oh, I was unfamiliar with the neighborhood. It's 20 miles an hour. This car is parked on both sides of the street. I'm highly visible. You see students. And this is the way Denver people drive. Women are just as aggressive and bad as men. The woman was totally in the wrong. She has no justification for her silliness. And I'll tell you what, that got my adrenaline going up. I'm like, does this woman really think she's in the right? She's going to call me for what? I honked the horn. She's going like this, rolls down the window, yells at me. I said, you're supposed to stop. Didn't call her names. Didn't threaten. That's when I wish I had a video camera rolling and post that on YouTube and say, this is the irrational way of women in America. And this isn't just an isolated event. I went back, told my supervisor, I called on the radio and said, you may get a phone call. Here's what happened. My supervisor was very kind. She goes, you don't need to call that in on the radio. She said, I laughed when I heard it. She goes, that's typical. She said, and I told her exactly what I said. She goes, you said too much. Next time somebody does that, just write down the plate, shut your driver's window, don't engage. Just say, supposed to stop. And I said, I'm sorry, I always feel the need to explain. She goes, problem is when you explain to people like that, then they pull you into this tug of war. And I said, but can you believe it? She goes, of course I can believe it. She goes, I've been watching what's happening. And she said, people just, they don't want to admit they're wrong. And I said, yeah, but she's going to call me for what? And I said, and she said, I'm harassing her. Supervisor laughed. And I said, it's funny how people use that word and just toss it around. And she goes, yep, I know. Harassing her. I didn't get out and go up to her door and beat on it. I'm just saying you're supposed to stop. We men are growing up in a world where this is becoming the norm. If I were to sit there and tell you that on a given day, one of our very respected mechanics told me yesterday, we're short drivers, so the mechanics have to come in and cover routes. And I said, and he gets paid mechanics pay, basically $42 an hour. He said, I don't like driving the routes. He said, the way people drive out there, the way these kids are today, and he says, you turn a bus over or anything, he says, they can get your house, they can get your bank account, they can clean you out. True story, folks. You think they can just sue the employer I work for? They can come after me if there's any negligence on my part. And that, after 12 plus years of driving school buses in the state of Washington, state of Minnesota, and here in Colorado, it's becoming apparent more and more to me that there is so much liability on my head, it's not worth it. Enter into the factor that you've got adults that are my age or younger than me that have not grown up in their mental state. That woman's making a complete horse's butt out of herself. Goes back and talks to one of the parents. Now, I'm just assuming that he probably told her, you know what? You saw the bus. What are you doing? She walked back to her car, and when I went to pull away to leave, he waved and smiled at me, and I thought, I'm sure he didn't stand up for her side. This is American women justifying their actions, being rude. And it's like, ma'am, I'm 49 years old. My kids are watching what you're doing. And at this point, they're putting the windows down to hear the conversation. I'll tell you what was really weird after that altercation, I didn't hear one word out of my students for the rest of the way to downtown to the school. And I thought, well, that's curious. I've noticed something today. People are afraid of conflict. People are afraid of confrontation. I don't like it. But there's adrenaline in me, and there's something in me, and there's a lion heart. I'm small. I don't threaten anybody. But when I'm standing on what's right, it just gives me that energy to go, no, I'm not backing down. And the reason I point this out, that this isn't just an isolated ding-dong woman case. This is the norm. Most women just run my stop sign. I lay on that horn, and they pretend not to see. We men talk about that all the time. I said, you ever notice when women do something in traffic, you honk and they pretend they don't hear and see? He said, oh yeah, they're not going to look you in the eye because they know the minute they look at you. Or there are those few that look at you and they look at you with that flaky, blanked out stare. What is his problem? Yesterday morning, before I went to my routes, a gentleman who's a little bit odd, I don't feel comfortable conversing with him. He's Jewish. And he starts talking about global warming, and I said, you know what? I don't buy that stuff. And then he said this thing saying that my God doesn't exist, and evolution, and genodes prove evolution, and that Dawkins was right. And one of the Christian men in there came up to him and said, you're taking on a big gun here with me. He says, I would quit. I'm like, wow, thanks for the compliment. And we went back and forth. I told him there was a flood. Nope, there was no flood because he's done the math and there'd only be an inch deep of water over the land. I said, really? I said, Marianas Trench is what, 30,000 feet deep? Everest is 29,000 feet. I explained to him the plates moving back, colliding, creating the mountains. The water roars down. I said, there's seashells on every peak in the world, dude. What we have today, folks, is a complete irrational level of thinking. We're going to talk about that. Hang on. I had to let the little doglet in. Both of those things rattled me. Not because I'm unsure of myself. Not because I thought, uh-oh, I've done something. Not at all. The woman rattled me that ran the stop sign because I thought, does she really think she's in the right? And this is what's happening. Do you know now that if you honk the horn or even say anything, and what they're teaching people today is when somebody does something wrong in traffic, don't even look at them, don't honk. And I'll tell you a theory that I had that goes all the way back to the 90s when the gangs were proliferating. And does everybody remember when they came out with the speakers, those round tube speakers and those loud boom speakers that rattle your license plate frame? People said, oh, don't go up and yell at them. And I'm like, do you know what's happened in America? People have been bullied by a media, which is really in the minority, if you think about it, that we're not supposed to look an aggressive driver in the eye. I heard stories growing up when they had a hot-headed teenager who'd blast through a neighborhood and he kept doing it. And I heard one day all the neighbors came out because they knew what time he came out, and they all came down into the street and waited for him to come. And they blocked the road. And they surrounded his car and said, look, you little punk, you better knock it off or we're going to take care of business. You know, the teens backed off then. In America, everybody's so individualistic, nobody wants to do anything. And even the parents, none of them came over and started saying, hey, lady, you're way out of line. People are afraid. Surprisingly, I'm not. People say, well, somebody could have a gun. When I'm in my pickup and people do things they do, I hit that horn and I hold it down. Don't do that in the bus. I'll honk. But it's like, you know, you could get shot. And I said, how do they know I don't carry a gun? And I don't. But how do they know? Why have we as a society become so fearful of the evildoers. The Bible makes it very clear we're not supposed to fear those that do the wrong. And the problem is we live in a day and age where women and men have deceived themselves. The gentleman at work trying to tell me evolution's true and Dawkins is true. And then he said, the math proves it. And I said, really? Mathematics proves evolution? I said, again, tell me where the first living cell came from. And he couldn't. And I said, you see, you sit there and tell me that God spoke all this out of nothing is ridiculous. But you're telling me a cell came from randomness out of non-living material. And then he tried to tell me that they're manufacturing a mosquito. And I thought, wow, they're manufacturing a mosquito that God already made. Okay, wow, that's a smoking gun in your favor. He then said something that to me is the crux of the matter when it comes to the whole issue of why people reject biblical truth. He said, if you expect me to believe in a God that was not created, that's impossible. And I didn't think on my feet quickly enough to say, that right there is your problem. But I did say to him, I said, well, there's 3 verses that apply to you. I said, number 1, the fool said in his heart, there's no God. I said, so that nails you, number 1. Number 2, it says in 1 Corinthians, the natural man comprehendeth not the things of God. And I said, that being said, you're a natural man. You can't comprehend the things of God because you don't have the Spirit of God living in you. Number 3, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. I said, you want an answer for everything. And I said, and you don't like to hear this. Well, when it comes to God, you have to have faith. I said, you see that chair over there? I said, you sit down in the chair. You don't even, do you pick it up and look at the frame and the legs and make sure it's going to hold? I said, no, you just sit down. I said, you have no doubt that chair is going to hold you up. I said, that's faith. I said, the stuff you're sitting here telling me, I said, it cannot be backed up by one shred of science. There is no proof. I said, you're exercising more faith to believe in this poppycock belief system than I do that God created the earth in 6 days and rested on the 7th. No. And then I had to finally say, look, the bottom line is, you're not going to convince me, I'm not going to convince you, and I'm done with this conversation. Then he told me that I don't have enough knowledge and that I refuse to talk to you. And I said, knowledge? I said, if you expect me to read your science journals that are all... I said, did it ever dawn on you that this country, that the universities, that the media, that the textbooks you read are so anti-God that you're not going to get one shred of objective, scholastic anything? Well, his eyes got this wide and he says, wow, you really believe... I said, dude, it's so obvious. I said, the fact is God has proven himself to me. I have personal testimony of what God has done in my life, and you can't deny that at all. This is the backdrop, Christian men and women, that we live in. This is the stage that we're standing on. I don't care if you're a school bus driver. I don't care if you work in an office in a downtown city in America. I don't care where you go in this life. I'm going to tell you a little story that was on the order of out of the ordinary. 2011, I went to church in Spokane, in the South Hill region of Spokane, Washington. I had a 65-passenger school bus. Great bus, diesel, air brakes, the whole thing. And the youth pastor asked me if I'd be willing to drive this bus down to Soda Springs, Idaho, to a little Baptist church down in a heavily Mormonized town. The high school students were going to do a vacation Bible school for a week. I thought, wow, that'd be great. They didn't pay me. I just did it. And great trip. Went down there, and the day before we were supposed to leave, the youth pastor says, how'd you like to drive over to Yellowstone? I'm thinking, Yellowstone? I haven't been there since I was a kid. Let's do it. So I drove the bus over to Yellowstone. And before we left, we decided to go down to, and it's failing me, it's a big lake on the border of Idaho and Utah. And it's big. You park. You can either go into the park and pay the fee, or you can just walk in. and not pay. And we parked off the side of the highway. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and you can walk out literally a half a mile, and water's only up to your chest. And it's a pretty great place. We stopped and got these huge inner tubes that we squeezed at the back door of the bus. I mean, huge inner tubes, and they're up on top of the seats. And it was fun. The kids all went off to go swimming. I went swimming for a while, and then I went back to the bus. Just wanted to do some personal introspection, and just out there in the middle of the edge of Utah, Idaho wilderness. And I mean, you talk about that part of the country, it's just bleakage. I wait for a car to go by. I'm crossing the highway, and of course it has the name of the church on the side of the bus, and still school bus yellow, and this motorist stops, guy older than me. And I can't, my memory fails me the exact words of what he said, but something to the effect, he rolls his window down and he says, I don't know why you'd actually believe in the ridiculousness of God. And you know, I'm waiting to cross the street. I'm not even in a mode where I'm thinking, oh yeah, somebody's going to challenge my Christian faith in the middle of Nothingville, southern Idaho. And he speeds off. And before I could even, wow, did that really just happen? He doesn't even know me. I'm the other side of the street waiting to go to the bus. There's no other cars. There's nothing. No trees. I mean, this is desolate. It looks like the Israeli wilderness. I go back to my bus and I thought, boy, I wish that clown would come back. And I'd say, so you mean to tell me that all these kids out here having fun just did Vacation Bible School, that they think that they're believing in a ridiculous God? You think the teenagers would really get behind something like this? Yes, we live in a world that is laughing at the idea of God. And not only are they laughing at him, their actions are consistent with their denial of him. I know I go on about a woman running a stop sign, but we see this stuff all day, every day. And there is something wrong with Western women. I've said that in other videos. They're gone, dude. They're gone, most of them. And you look at their irrational thought process. They don't think they've done wrong. Going through that with my ex has done huge damage to my boy. Doesn't even bother to stop most of the time and go, whoops, I'm sorry. It's amazing that when you deny God, that this is what you get. That the foolishness of man just becomes more self-evident. And I want to say to my viewers that Pacific does not think he's perfect. I've got a whole video testimonial behind me to prove that. And I'm reading something that a coworker gave to me the other day. It's a tract published in 1900s called Pauline Sanctification. It's very interesting. Very interesting. And I'm going to finish reading it and share with you some of the things that we may need to relook at something. That in it I'm finding that, boy, if this is true, this is very interesting. Because it could be the difference between why you go to churches which are frozen, chosen, rigid, self-righteous, versus ones that really lean on the grace of God. We'll get into that later. That rattled me yesterday because what bothers me is a guy pointed this out one day. He says, you know what I've noticed about you? He says, you need to be a teacher. I said, why? He says, because you always want to sit down and rationally explain to the person your point of view or why they're wrong. He said, that's a good quality. But he said, the problem is the people that you want to have the teaching moment with, most of them are idiots. The woman in the Lexus yesterday It took me 2 seconds to figure out her husband must be a general manager of a dealership. She's the spoiled princess. They slap a dealer plate on the car that she wants to drive. And I'm going to say something, different strokes for different folks, but a silver boring Lexus. And there is a mentality with the people who drive these vehicles. Ooh, I have a Lexus. And it's funny because Pacific, for as dumb as he is, for that I just drive a school bus, I told you, watching out my windshield every day is an education all by itself. Women that have gone to college, men that have gone to college wear suits and ties, they drive like banditos. And do you know what? They don't have one shred of conviction anymore that they're doing wrong. I go through a school zone 3 lanes wide one way on Calumet Street, and everybody's passing me. Women in Subarus, women in SUVs, men with contractor trucks with the business emblazoned on the side. And you know what's funny? I mentioned to my supervisor, I said, do you notice that today you confront anybody, that everything is all about finding fault with the authority, never themselves? She goes, oh, it's rampant. Anybody hear cops got killed in Ferguson, Missouri? Crap is still going on over Michael Brown. Classic American ghetto thug. Dad should have been arrested. I'm so tired of the bipolarization, and I call it bipolarization of the black-white issue. Guy robs a convenience store, roughs up clerk, goes out on the streets. Cop tells him get out of the way, doesn't even know he's a suspect. And the guy starts mouthing off and ends up committing his own death sentence right on the spot. And a bunch of ill-informed people with very little conscience, very little fear, if any, of God, raised to go to the streets, loot, burn things down, start problems, and claim that it's white racism. And it goes on and on. And Officer Wilson is under a fine-tooth comb constantly. His wife and him receive death threats, have had to have protection at their house. This is what happens when we say that there's no God. This is what happens when we let materialism reign supreme. This is what happens when women go to women's studies. Our federal government should shut down this whole feminist bias that is just rampant in our universities, colleges, and public schools. Most of the public schools are dominated by female teachers that do not allow boys to be boys, but want to make boys into little girls. And this is one of the reasons why we see boys becoming bisexual. This is one of the reasons we see boys becoming feminine, because they've been under women to wear the pants in the family and have literally reduced boys to wussies. Women have been conditioned and taught that they don't have to listen to us, that we are stupid. I heard a student on my bus yesterday in the afternoon. I had to move her to the front. She stands up and walks around. I told her to stop, and then she did it again, and I stopped and said, hey, come on, right there. I love it. The teens say, really, mister? Really, missus? Have a seat. And I try to work with my kids. I don't threaten to write them up unless they just cross the line too much. I say, well, you just keep digging yourself a hole. I'm going to get you now. She sits down, and I hear this discussion behind me, and she's like, stop it. Shut up. And then she says, I can't believe you came out of somebody's DICK. Okay, that's enough. Look at the examples of adults. I got a whole busload of students. What part of flashing red lights and stop sign do you not see? I wonder if that woman would have used that same logic if the railroad gates came down and a train was coming. Oh, I'm unfamiliar with the neighborhood, and would she run through the gates? Of course not. We know she's lying. She saw the bus. She didn't want to stop. And I'll tell you what's going through their minds. I'm young looking. I don't have to stand. I'm just a school bus driver. Challenging me, threatening to turn me in. Ooh, my job's at risk because of you in a Lexus with a dealer plate. Really? You think 12 years of my life is going to come crashing down over you? I conducted myself in order. I did say too much. My supervisor said, "You said too much." She goes, "I understand." But she said, "Next time it happens, shut your window, write the plate down, and just turn it in." She said, "You can't even reason with people like that." I said, "But there's parents standing." She goes, "It doesn't matter anymore." I was talking to a guy at work yesterday, and he made the comment about today's women being a Jezebel spirit. And I said, "Oh my gosh, yes." Another gentleman at work, when I was done with my midday, called me over to his bus. We had a conversation for a while. He said, "Are you having a crisis of faith?" I said, "Not so much a crisis of faith. I've just got some, not questions about the truth of Scripture, but I said, I'm struggling with some things." And we talked, and he said something very interesting. He says, "I try to have this conversation with anybody, and people that claim to be Christians, and they just shy away, and they don't." I said, "You know what? We're surrounded by people who don't believe. We're surrounded by an irrational world that thinks they're rational." This gentleman at work that wanted to debate evolution with me said, "Well, my belief system is very logical, rational." I said, "No, it isn't." I said, "You've got to be kidding me." He says, "I go off what I can see." I said, "Show me in the living record, sir, where there's proof of evolution." I said, "Look around this room. Do you see any half monkeys in here with lizard tails?" And they ignored that. I said, "So you're telling me that the vehicle for evolution suddenly stopped and we have the completed form?" I said, "Sir, how come you got 2 eyes, 2 ears, and you don't have an eye up here?" "Well, some people," I said, "there's nobody that has an eye up here, okay?" I said, "There is something called deformities." Then he tried to tell me that adaptation is evolution. I said, "No, God programmed us. Polar bears have thicker, different skin and fur to survive cold temperatures." But I said, basically, brown bear, black bear, grizzly bear, panda bear, I said, you needed a male and a female bear, and God created in the DNA code for them to proliferate and have uniqueness of kinds. I'm going to remind myself, as I tell my viewers, that you cannot argue with a foolish man or woman. My problem, I think, if I present the right information, and this is the problem of most women in America, not only have they left logical thinking, they are operating on sheer emotion. This guy's making me uncomfortable. He honked at me, and he's telling me I'm in the wrong. And you know what the classic American woman has been taught and conditioned? You don't have to take that. That's abusive. That's harassment. You went through my stop sign. If that kid had stepped out in front of you and you killed him, you'd be charged with vehicular homicide. You'd be charged with going too fast through a school zone. The police, the attorneys would have scrutinized this with a fine-tooth comb. They would have pulled me in there and asked me question after question. I'd be going to court hearing after court hearing because of your stupidity, lady. This isn't a lady. This is an immature child in a vehicle too big for her. I watched a woman yesterday pull out right in front of a motorcycle. And I tell you what, when I was a kid, women were safer drivers. They got cheaper insurance rates. Now it's the opposite. 19 to 25-year-old women texting, but it isn't just them. I watched a woman. She was close enough to me, looked out my service door, and I see her flipping her touchscreen up and scrolling through something on the internet. The traffic light changes, I watch her, and she keeps doing it as she's moving forward. And do you know how many times I've watched these women, they're texting? And I watched a woman hit somebody the other day on the freeway. She was bound and determined to get around me, got in the right, went to pass. A car moved in from the on-ramp. Everybody stopped all of a sudden, bam. I'm like, oh, now you're really going to make time. The guy got out of his truck. 3 cars in a row all tapped each other. You cannot talk to an American woman, and it's hard for me because I have emotions too. A lot of women think that men don't have feelings. We do. And the biggest challenge for Pacific every single day is don't let your emotions rule any decision you make regarding kids, drivers, or coworkers that you don't care for. It is tough. It does cut you to the quick. Everything in me wants to say, hey, stupid woman, you got a whole busload of kids watching. Do you really think that you've just done the right thing? Do you know that if you'd have just said, sir, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention, I wouldn't have written this up. It wouldn't have gone one step further. You want to take me on? You want to tell me you're going to turn me in for what? Lady, I got you, babe. And if the police do their job, they'll be sending her a letter. This is the world we live in, folks, and it's not going to get any better. I'm going to boldly assert to my viewers that, yes, we've talked about here in Denver, the mile-wide, inch-deep city of shallow people, that even in the churches, you're not going to get real committed depth. That there are problems in the evangelical kingdom, if you will, in America. I told you that America has more cultural Christianity and less biblical Christianity, whereas when I lived in China and I went to the Philippines, that the Filipinos, that the Chinese, when they come to saving faith in Christ, they're serious about it. Over here, Christianity is almost like an add-on. It's a bumper sticker. We're worried about our SUVs, our 401ks, our nice houses, our future. Oh, by the way, we want to tell somebody we have Jesus in our life, and it doesn't show. There's a woman at work that just started. She's a paraprofessional, 45 years old, very nice woman. We started talking, found out she's a believer. And she started opening up to me that she moved to Colorado from LA. I said, well, that's why we get along. It's funny, all the Colorado comments about Californians ruined Colorado. They have something here unique to Colorado that if you can go back, I don't know how many generations, you can get something called pioneer plates. And I've lived here for a total of 13 years between two tours in good old Denver. And the license plates that say pioneer plates are saying that their family was original settlers here, et cetera, et cetera. Every one of those pioneer plate drivers, speed, no turn signals, everything. I thought, no, Coloradans drive like this. Every woman that I met from California, when they find I'm from California, we get along just fine. We talk different. There's just a fingerprint out there. And no California drivers are bad, but it's nationally. I don't care if you go to Boston, Detroit. Shoot, you had a black woman getting on the sidewalk and going around the school bus stop sign every day. And finally, after repeated complaints by the school bus driver, they set a cop out there and caught her right in the act. They made her wear a shirt and walk around in public. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And did you know that woman not once in the courtroom said, I'm sorry? Women are so high on themselves today, so busy sniffing their own deodorant, that they're not rational. They spend more time in front of a bathroom mirror with their dowdy looks and their cheesy dyke-cut hairstyles. They're going to take on every man. They're going to drive their SUV, and they're going to think they're a hard-working, respected person. And I look at that and go, woman, you expect us males to respect you? You got to be kidding me. I respect a woman who has God living in her, and she says, you know what, sir? I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. Thank you, ma'am, for admitting that. Next time, just be careful. I'll let it go. Women don't realize this. You want to take me on? Because if you want equality, I'll get you. I'll turn that in. You're going to get a message. You're going to get a message that, you know what? You keep going on about your anti-man stance, and it's going to bite you in the butt. Because if men do that in the workplace and men do that, we get in trouble. We get called into the office. I mean, it's just a double standard. So this Christian woman that just started at work, she starts telling me her husband has had 9 affairs on her. And she found out she actually just met his ex-wife, and she had asked him about that, and he really didn't say why that marriage fell apart. And the ex-wife told her, the reason the marriage fell apart, I came home once, he was in bed with a woman, and I came home not too long later, and he was in bed with a man. He just got out of jail for a DUI. gets a cheap phone, and he's already calling and hooking up with girls. She's been married to him for 5 years. He did say to her he wants to go to church, which was a great segue. I said, why don't you come to mine? I said, our pastor's talking about sexual immorality, adultery, and it's titled The Best Sex in the World. I said, don't tell your husband you know what the content is. Just say, a coworker invited me to church, and he just started going there and said the people seem to be genuine and real, and the pastor seems to be a good preacher. She said, I went home the other day. She told me yesterday. I said, are you coming? She goes, oh, he doesn't have a choice. I said, we're going 9 o'clock. She goes, we'll be there between 8:30 and 9. I said, do you want me to sit by you guys? She goes, yep, and I want you to watch his body language. I said, well, we'll find out if he's truly a Christian or not. She goes, oh, believe me, when the pastor starts getting into this, you'll be able to see. I said, well, I'll try not to look. I'll just use my peripheral vision. One of my viewers sent me a video on Facebook, which I do intend to watch, about somebody having their experience in Denver. I thought that was interesting, and I do want to watch it. I've been just bulldozed over with so much to do. And you know what? Denver is not a healthy place. I'm going to tell my viewers something. That I rate a city or a town on the way people drive. It's not good here. So much immaturity, so much vanity, so much aggression, so much anger. Women, men, you got the nice vehicles, their faces are rageful. And their biggest goal here is to beat somebody to the next red light. And this is becoming the American way. It's not just Denver. I don't care if you go to Atlanta. People are bored with themselves. People are grasping at straws. They don't want to believe in God. They want to laugh at the idea of God, and they want to drown themselves into materialism, which is an empty hole. It's like a colander. Dip it down in the water, lift up, water runs out, and people are too stupid to realize that. But they'll wax eloquent and prove to you there's no God. And I can prove to you there's a devil, and I can prove to you there's a God just by their actions. I can prove the existence of God just by what has happened in my own life. That when you transgress God's laws, there are consequences for it. Guilt and a whole lot of other ramifications. That people who cheat, that even though women are comfortable with friends with benefits, that the psychological issues that come out of horsing around and playing around, that the Bible's very clear that when you have sex with somebody, you bond with them. And you can play casual all you want. But like Paul Young's song, every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. That's why the Bible says to guard your heart. The main focus of this video is giving you yet another example of an irrational, feminized American woman who cannot submit even to authority. I have authority not over her, but I have authority over that bus, and I have authority over traffic in the context that, hey, I'm responsible for those kids. You bet I'm going to say something. Stop, slow down, pay attention. Don't get into my face. If you're doing what is right, you don't need to fear them that are in authority, the Bible says. And the problem with Americans is they don't believe in authority except themselves. And this plays out every single day. Women think it's okay to just drift into my lane, no turn signal, and I honk. And here's something that's very much a growing trend. I'll lay on that horn as they're not even fully past. I'm hitting the brake. Do you think they would look up and drift back in it? Nope. They just keep coming over. Do they think this is like the movies, that they're not going to get hit by a 26,000-pound bus with students loaded? That's the GVW on that. So I asked myself a question with regard to the evolutionist and his debate stance. Should I make myself familiar with all the science journals on genodes and all this? And I said no. There are some counterfeit things I study, like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Catholicism, and the cults out there and the false theological viewpoints, because we are surrounded with error, folks. The Bible's very clear. 1 John says, test the spirits to see whether they be of God or not. And a lot of Christians don't even do that anymore. I noticed somebody that I like, one of my fans on Facebook, was promoting The Shack, that supposedly there's a movie coming out or something to do with somebody in it. I don't recommend The Shack. The Shack is as fuzzy and new agey, and it paints a picture of Jesus that is not in accordance with Scripture. I remember when I was in Hong Kong at Videoke, and this Filipina stood up to sing, "What if God were one of us, just a slob like us?" You know, you listen to that, and it's easy to get caught up in that, but can I say something? God is not a slob. God is not just like us. He took on the nature of a man in the form of Jesus Christ, but he is not like us. He was without sin. And I think it's interesting when we talk about the panhandlers and stuff, and Christians glibly and almost piously say, well, you should give them money. You could be entertaining angels unaware. And I said, I don't believe an angel has alcohol all over their breath. I mean, do you see what's happening in our age? We're caught up in technology. The newest iPhone, iPad, satellite radio. Gonna get a Toyota Prius. Wow, there's a man's car. The pickup trucks, they're dumbing down their looks. They're getting bigger and poochier with more plastic. And people are so caught up in such superficial vanity, and yet they'll mock us. I told this lady the other day, we've got to get it in our heads that Jesus was very clear when he says, marvel not that the world hates you. It hated me first. It's going to hate you too. You're not above your teacher. Some encouragement's been coming out of some place. The weather's been good. It's raining today. I'm glad it's rain and not snow. Denver needs Jesus, man. Denver needs God, and they don't get it. They don't see it. Most people in this country live their lives over dust. They think they're important because they got an SUV. I see women that don't have a job. They got husbands making good money, and they're walking around their purebred dogs in the neighborhood all day. That's another thing. I said this before. A woman's, 20 feet from the crosswalk. I get a break in traffic. I start to go, and she just steps right out. She doesn't have a walk sign. It's a stop sign. Doesn't have enough conscientiousness to think, hey, that bus is going to have a hard time. And you're like, wow, really? I see it. Women, I have the right. Not really. Little common sense in order. Even me, when I'm walking, I stop at the intersection. That big truck was there first. As soon as he gets, I'll look. Okay, there's no cars coming. I'm going to wait for him to go, and then I'll cross. And you know what? Most of the time when I do that, the guy will wave. Yesterday, I was making a right turn, and a guy was on a bicycle. And I'll tell you, cyclists in Denver are some of the worst wieners I've ever seen. They are idiots. Guy's on a sidewalk. I get a green light, and you can't turn right unless you have that green light. And I see this guy whizzing down the sidewalk, and I pull forward. I don't turn, and I stop real quick. He stops and looks at me, and then he blasts across the street through the crosswalk. Colorado driver manual says you're supposed to walk your bikes across the crosswalk. They don't do that. Cyclists here, they'll be up on the sidewalk 1 minute in the street. Then they'll race across the crosswalk when they got the green light and go around and then cut off all the traffic. And they do it all the time. And cops do catch bikes once in a while, but it's not their focus. I was just told yesterday by my supervisor that we don't have as many cops working on these problems anymore, and the public knows that. And that's why a dash cam is important. And, still having some problems with the one I got, trying to find the right thing to go into it. Going to ask my son, he's very techno-oriented, see if he can get that working for me and how to upload. But if I can pull it off, I'm going to mount that on the dash in the bus sometimes, and let you see the videos yourself. It just amazes me that we live in a time when a woman blows through the stop sign and starts yelling at me and is going to turn me in. I'm sitting here in the street with a stop sign out, and that's harassment? Even the students on my bus that are teenagers can see through that ridiculous line of reasoning. So the next time you see a school bus driver, don't think he's just a bus driver. Please realize what is on his head. That if I do something wrong, if there's any negligence or any infraction of the law and a student gets killed, that parent, if I owned a house, come after it, bank account, assets, they can do that. I learned all this through my attorney. They can look at assets. They can look at what people have, people that are blaming. You can go after things. Did you know that if you've got an adult son living in your house, that the attorney can go after the parents and their homeowner's policy because he's a member of the household? When I lived in Washington, because I lived with my uncle, I went to State Farm to get an insurance policy for my truck, having moved from Minnesota. The guy says, "Oh, you live at this address?" I said, "Yeah, that's my uncle." He says, "Oh, since you're a member of the household, you get a discount." Sweet. That'll bite you in the butt, though, when you go and do something. That if I went out and ran 10 stop signs and hit 10 people, they could also come after the house I'm living in. Be careful who you house, folks. It could come back to get you. Especially if you're a homeowner and have a homeowner's insurance policy. These lawsuits are scary. And Americans are primed and ready to sue at the drop of a hat. That uneducated, immature woman operating solely on feelings and her own self-centeredness yesterday fails to realize if she'd hit that kid, her world would have been turned upside down in 60 seconds. Police investigation, an immediate ticket. I don't know if they would incarcerate. I don't know how that works. But I don't think they just let her go. And she would be buried in court battles. They would go after her and her husband, their assets, everything, and they would win. Most people that get into a car don't think that what they do when they turn that ignition on could ruin their life. I watch the way these business execs drive through the Denver Tech Center, and they are stupid. They think that because they got insurance that will cover them. It won't. You create enough damage, you take away some woman's husband. I sat on a court jury trial of a woman who lost her husband. She went after loss of companionship, pain and suffering, and loss of income that he provided. It was in the millions of dollars, and they were going after somebody's estate. You think I'm joking? When you get in your car, you better pay attention. Your insurance ain't going to just cover you. Especially if it's gross negligence. The attorney is going to roast you over an open fire. Most Americans don't think that. They think insurance is their little safety net. Comprehensive auto insurance is comprehensive for your auto, but there's limits on how much is paid out to an injured party. Some of them are capped out at $50,000 per person or $50,000 per accident. So if 6 people are in the car like my son, $50,000 policy has got to be divided among 6 injured people. That's what's fun about this channel. We're enlightening, we're educating, and we're setting free men and women to believe the right things about God and themselves and know their place. There's a place for us men, there's a place for women, and women are not supposed to take on men. That woman doing what she did, biblically, you have no right to take on me and the authority of my position in the seat of that chair of the school bus. You broke the law. Stand down, woman. They don't. And they're not going to. Women have cars, women have jobs, women think they don't have to submit to anybody. And yet they're still slaves. slaves of the devil, slaves to their selfish little narcissistic world, and they don't see it because they don't have the right glasses on, the ones that see by faith. And a lot of Christian girls and men don't grow up either. So yes, this is an almost hour-long rant about a woman who runs a stop sign because there's so much wrapped up in that. If this was just one isolated incident, I could mention it in 10 minutes and be done with it. But it's a mentality out there. And I love my job. I'm comfortable driving that big old bus. Yesterday I was given a spare, which is one of those flat front end 77 passenger Cummins, and I'm like, oh, this thing has so much more power, and I love this big old bus. I feel comfortable in that big stuff. But I'm just amazed at the lack of disrespect and safe driving around us. That if you go back 30 years ago, that would be unheard of. Driving a school bus and somebody cutting 2 inches in front of a junkie public wouldn't have tolerated that. Women that think they're professionals think it's okay to cut me off, no turn signal, and then I honk and they look at you, what's wrong? Woman, is your brain on pot? Do you really think that we're not? And this is another thing that's happened. And I told my supervisor, I said, I'm tired of this political correct thing where you're not supposed to react. She goes, I know. It's ridiculous. I said, you're not supposed to react. They can do whatever they want, but we're supposed to be the professional. I said, I don't go by that. I believe in handling myself in such a way that I don't get in trouble, but I'm going to say something. It's like, you're in the wrong, babe. Read your Colorado driver's manual, and I'm sorry, you don't get a free pass because you're unfamiliar with the neighborhood. If you kill and hit somebody, that is not going to fly in the court. The attorney's not going to say, well, she gets off because she was in an unfamiliar neighborhood. It's a straight, it's a square block. It says 20 miles an hour. You weren't going 20. There's a school bus. There's children. Did you not see any of that? If you're not seeing any of that, maybe you shouldn't drive. I think it's funny. There's people with eyesight better than mine. And they're not looking at what they're supposed to be looking at. Myopic generation. What the hell is so important on text messaging and your stupid phone that you can't pay attention to driving? Did you know these young women are killing people because of texting? And today's women are so self-centered, they just want to get through the court and get over it and get on with their lives. You killed somebody. It's only going to get worse. 2 Timothy 3, know this, in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, haters of those that are good, treacherous, rash, conceited, without natural affection. My gosh, we see that women abort their children. That's not natural affection. Without natural affection. Natural affection. Women to women, men to men, lesbian, gay, bi. Do you notice something out there? That I just told you a real life story where a woman didn't think she did anything wrong. You ran the stop sign and you're lucky that kid didn't step out. Your life could have been so different yesterday that kid stepped out and you hit him. Even if you only bumped him. Even if he had no injuries. Just you coming into contact with that kid. You're nailed, lady. People don't want to stop for a school bus is what it boils down to. That woman thought she was too important to stop because she's driving a Lexus with dealer plates. I've met people. We had a woman in school in Prescott. I'll mention the name of it. The dealership was Lamb Chevrolet. At the time in the 80s, she was the daughter of one of the big shots. I think he owned it. I watched her cheating on a test in Spanish class, looking at somebody else's sheet. What is it? What is it? This girl was stuck up. She wasn't what I call a hottie. But she was cheating. And I was like, wow. There is a mentality. Oh, my husband owns a dealership. We get dealer cars. We don't even have to pay for them. There is a mentality out there, folks. People think because they own a materialistic good that makes them better. Do you know when that woman sits on the toilet, she smells when she takes a dump? Pacific, that's gross. I'm doing that for a reason. Nobody's better than anybody. I had a woman in the break room the other day, and I'll close with this. Grossly overweight, to the point of being just unhealthily overweight. She started bragging about herself, and I said, you know what? Nobody's better than anybody. She goes, I said, I'm sorry, the ground is level at the foot of the cross. Nope. She kept on going on and on. I said, you know what? It says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I said, you're not better than anybody else. Oh, yes, I am. What I didn't realize is she was being a jerk and playing me. And somebody said, oh, she's got you going. I said, were you stringing me? She laughed and said, yes. I thought, but why would somebody even joke about that? Did you know there's women that don't believe they're sinners? Oh, that was the other thing she said. She goes, I'm not a sinner. I've actually heard women say that. We know what God says about pride. And I know I've been struggling lately. Pride goeth before a fall. How come these people aren't falling? To quote from the book, The K, young boss. I can picture God saying, young boss, I'm giving them enough rope to let them get more confidence and more arrogant, because when I pull on the end of that thing, it's going to hurt. God gives some people a lot of leash. That woman yesterday, she'll go on thinking she's Miss Wonderful. And it may not happen this life, but when she stands before God, God's saying, remember this incident down on Pearl Street? And everything else that she's done wrong. People aren't living with that in their forefront. Anyways, I got to get ready for work. Watch out there in traffic. Don't think when you step in that crosswalk, you got the right of way. A friend of mine bought a scooter, one of my viewers, and he said that he was going and, or no, I guess he was on his bicycle, I'm sorry. And a woman was looking for cars and then just pulled out right in front of him. When you're driving, don't look for that big car. Look for everything. Start seeing motorcycles, start seeing bicycles, start seeing pedestrians. It's funny. Here in Denver, people will slam on the brakes for geese crossing the street, but when they see a person, they won't even slow down. They'll get as close to that guy's body as possible. I'm like, how have we come to that? I've watched women. I was on a city bus in Duluth. This woman slams on the brakes in front of the city bus. The city bus slammed on the brakes because the woman, not only she pulled right out in front of the bus to avoid hitting a squirrel. And the driver laid on the horn. He looks at me and says, what a dumb broad. She's going to cause an accident over a squirrel. I said, I'll hit the thing. I'll run the squirrel right over. Not with kids on a school bus, but in my truck, I'm not going to slow down for a squirrel. You know, they proliferate like rats. And I'm sorry if I sound insensitive, but you got to use common sense. If I can avoid hitting the thing and there's nobody behind me, that's one thing. But if there's heavy traffic, there's been a few times I've been driving, ooh, got him. And I didn't aim for it. It's just like, I'm not going to slam on the brakes with a big box truck behind me over a squirrel. That people aren't thinking right out there. And this is all, we're going to talk more about this. That the foolishness of man is becoming more evident, and it's in direct relation to them denying God and laughing at us. And when you deny God, you start losing common sense. We're seeing the dumbing down of American culture, and it's all around us. This is Pacific signing off. Happy Friday, everybody. Let's have a great weekend and stay tuned to the Sexy Asian Dragon, where we bring you more controversy and more truth is stranger than fiction stories, keeping you riveted and gripping your seats for the next installment of Pacific Ocean Asia. Bye-bye.